Welcome to the party, Jets fans. Thursday, March 14th, day 4 of free agency. And yes, it is a party. The never-ending disco inferno out of one Jets drive, which is why I'm feeling festive myself. I put on the velvet jacket, pink shirt. You can see I'm bringing the thunder today. Yeah, not a lot happened in free agency specifically, and we're going to get to some of those moves, certainly. But a lot is always happening out of one Jets drive, and this organization never fails to entertain. I am AM Pfeffer. This is NYJ Ground Crew. Thank you for joining me today. Let's get right to it. We've got to start this time around. I pushed him off yesterday because I didn't want him to be the dominating topic, but we've got to start this time with Aaron Rodgers. A lot of smoke. He finally made a comment. He finally said something about something that somebody said that he did, whispered in some corner of the universe here. Okay. Flat out denial for what he said privately, quote unquote, about Sandy Hook. We'll take it at that. I want to say this about Aaron Rodgers. I want to be clear about this. I want to share a personal view because it's important. If you're watching me, if you're interested in what I'm saying, yeah, Matthew, let's just get right to it. I'm actually going to put up questions and comments at the end of the show, but yeah, Matthew Simon, right boy. Right off the bat, oh boy, not that. Yeah, we got it. We have to talk about the elephant in the room. We've got to address this. And I want to give my personal opinion on something. And if it turns you off and you want to turn me off because of it, that's understandable. But we've got to talk about this because so many voices in so many places, so many feelings about this. And some people are just turned off or even turned on by what's going on with this and just want to be a staunch believer in Rodgers. I don't like Aaron Rodgers. I want to say that. I was never crazy about this guy before we traded him. I respected the hell out of him, of course. He is one of the top 7 or 8 quarterbacks of all time. I respect him as a game player. I respect him on the field. But I've never found myself rooting for him, probably sometime around 2017. His dating life, I couldn't care less about, but he seemed like he wanted us to care about it. The vaccination stuff during the media, during COVID, the lying, it was a turnoff, to be honest with you. Followed by the endless me, interviews on McAfee. That's what it felt like all the time. I wasn't a fan of those. I never was a big fan of how he announced even coming to the Jets, the way he did it, certain things that he said about himself when he did it. But here he was. I mean, we all talked ourselves into him and the excitement around him. He is that good, obviously. The Jimmy Kimmel pseudo accusations. Yeah, not great. And now this grotesque Sandy Hook, this and mini social media post denials, which is basically what it was. Nothing too big about it. Oh, and of course, let's not forget the never-ending, hanging over our head idea of him being RFK's vice presidential running mate, which we may or may not find out for another 12 days because it was RFK himself who said March 26th is when he's going to announce. Great. So the rest of us have to wait here in Jets land potentially for another 12 days while Rodgers says nothing. And JD has got to be out there, bringing new free agents in saying, don't worry, all is fine. Aaron Rodgers is our quarterback. So again, I didn't like the guy. I don't ever see myself liking him personally, but will I root for him? That's really the big question. The big question, all of us have to ask ourselves, are we going to root for this guy? I'm always going to root for the Jets. Always. Let's just put it that way. Because I'm sure I'm not crazy about Woody Johnson, right? And I'm on record. I'm here saying that very specifically. But, I'm always going to root for the Jets. I'm no longer crazy about Robert Saleh like I once was in the first 18 months of his tenure. I'm always going to root for the Jets. I'm never not going to root for the Jets. I said it yesterday about the idea of the notion we've got to put Aaron Rodgers' face because he is the face of the franchise next to the logo and somehow be okay with that and combine the two. But I'm always going to root for the logo. The logo on the side of my head right now that is, pseudo the idea of the New York Jets, whatever it may be, I'm always going to root for the Jets. I'm sure a lot of you are too. That's what I wanted to say about it. And I'm on record for it. But it's time for today's free agency. So let's talk about it. And it's important we get to number one guy right off the bat. Team captain, CJ Mosley, who came back on a friendly team contract, 2-year contract. We don't talk about friendly team contracts too much anymore. There's not a lot of those going out there. This actually feels like one. This is somewhat of an amazing story. This is absolutely a team-friendly contract because, he had, let's just talk about the contract itself. $17.25 million, $13.25 million of those in guarantees, $9 million this year guaranteed for him now. But, his cap charge would have been $21.5 million this year if he hadn't agreed to this pay cut, which is exactly what it is. And again, a team-friendly contract. As egregious as the Javon Kinlaw contract is, or a lot of us believe that it is, I don't think it was egregious at all, by the way. I don't think it was terrible by any means, this one-year deal we gave to Kinlaw. But this contract with Mosley, that's grade A beef, man. This is good stuff. This is excellent stuff all around. I think we should applaud CJ for even, making a good choice, because he could have easily been the post-June 1st designation cut. More than likely, ultimately would have happened. I don't think any of us wanted to see that happen. Anyone inside One Jets Drive included, and what he would have had to do and put himself back in the marketplace and try and get paid again, and whether that be long-term or he's got another one on a one-year prove-it deal, or he's going to end his career over the next 3 years on one-year prove-it deals. This is good. This is good for everybody all around. You keep your defensive captain in place. You keep your absolute Mike linebacker in place, on a top 5 unit. This is back-to-back top 5 units defensively, which is very hard to do. You do it 1 year is amazing. I mean, Salah and Ulbrich brought these guys back with him in the middle as captain, and yet we're top 5 unit again. There's no reason to think they can't do that for a 3rd year in a row. And yeah, I'm going to put a percentage on him and who he is. I think he plays at prime athlete days 80+% of the time. You might disagree with that, and that's fine, but that's good enough for me. He may never be the 90, 100% guy. He may never be the 26-year-old fresh legs that want him to be insane sideline to sideline perfectly all the time, Fred Warner all the time, whatever it may be. But he's definitely good enough, and his coverage skills have seemed to have gotten better in the past couple of years. We all can see the PFF grades on that. Not the PFS is the end-all be-all of anything, but they're there. The numbers prove it. So I'm very happy to have him back. I'm very happy to have him back on this contract, freeing up all that cap space, certainly, and another 2 years, which is probably what he's got left to do what he needs to do. We should all be happy that he's there. And, by the way, for avoiding more dead money, right? Because that's what would have happened if we had released him, and more than likely, unfortunately, probably would have had to, would have counted more dead money. Instead, we're going the other way, and he frees up a ton of capital just this year, so we can go back out and get the free agencies we need. I wonder how much of this decision is because what happened the first 2 years. I mentioned earlier, this is a team-friendly contract. Does a guy like Mosley, who is a team captain, who's always been known as a team player, actually think about that? And what I mean by that is, hey, you played essentially 1.5 games year 1 when you were here, and you missed year 2 all because of COVID, and you made that decision, and you still got paid something. Certainly, he's got paid something, which was a sizable amount. I think at the time it was $10 million. If anyone wants to correct me if that's wrong. But yeah, I mean, how much of that weighs in his decision? Said, fine, I did that. That happened. Those 2 years were gone. I've remained here. This team has been good to me, because, again, you don't hear much about the Jets being good to our players. You don't hear a lot of these guys leaving. Most of them are disgruntled. It happens all the time. And especially happened with David Harris and the way he was somewhat forced to retire. Certainly a few other guys come to mind who we've let go and didn't necessarily feel particularly good about it. But Mosley seems to be a good story with the Jets, in the way it was handled, and the way, he's stood up in front of the media over and over again and said, hey, I just want to be surrounded with good talent and a chance to compete. And he's really had that, especially on the defensive side of the ball in the past couple of years. So, again, I wonder if he kind of made that decision. I mean, certainly, money always plays into it, but what would he have gotten out on the open market had he been released, whatever? This was a good decision all around. We should all be excited. CJ Mosley is coming back. Having said that, let's look at what our needs are. Let's talk about it. We've talked about the best available out there. Let's take a look at who's still there. And forgive me, because I see my head is taking over some of the guys on the bottom left, but we'll go over their names. Yeah, very quickly, you can see Curtis Samuel, I think over an hour ago, he's off the list, but we're going to get to the wide receivers in just a minute. We are going to talk about who's left. I had some guards for the first couple of days here, and I've taken them off when we're talking about the offensive line. So those are our 6 offensive tackles that we could potentially take a look at. Let's just go down one by one. Again, I am beating the drum for Tyron Smith. At this point, please pay this man his money. Somehow get him in a uniform. Make him our offensive tackle. Absolutely. I hope a lot of us at this point agree. Yes, the durability questions remain. Doesn't matter. Get him there. He should get the money. He should be our left tackle. You're going to have an above average starting line with that. That is exciting to think about. Trent Brown is a good name. Would love to pry him away from what the Patriots did, but there are some question marks about his game and whether he's fitting into what looks like a new offensive line and the way we're going to be a real running team. And could he be the guy that we need, with a new scheme out there? I'm not so sure that he is. Tyron Smith, absolutely, though. Donovan Smith is probably 3rd on my list. Some questions just above Bakhtiari here. Some questions with him, but again, he had such a great career down in Tampa Bay. He was okay last year on Kansas City, and you could see the decline. But even for a one-year stopgap, if that's what we're looking for, he'd be good. I'd still rather pay Tyron Smith for 2 or 3 years and have him there. Bakhtiari, again, he's a one-year guy. Got to prove it. Failed designation. Great that you have the relationship with Rodgers, all of that, and that you are just an incredible career. But man, I mean, what is he? 7 knee surgeries? We can't rely on that. Andres Pete's a really interesting name, though. Somebody we should somewhat consider while he's still out there, and maybe would be a surprise, but not so much of a surprise if we gave him a 2-year deal to come over. Hasn't had the greatest career at guard down in the Saints, but played left tackle last year and played it well. And with the move to the scheme we seem to be moving towards, and what we want to be doing in the running game, he might be a decent option. Yosh, I don't, forgive me, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce his last name, Neiman. Yeah, my problem with him is another Green Bay Packer. And at this point, I don't know how all of you feel, but it's hard to digest thinking about another one of these guys on our team. But yeah, I mean, he's another option. He's really a top 100 free agent that's out there. So, I mean, look, there are some offensive tackles who are still on the market. All of them left tackles, all of them good possibilities. So, Tyron Smith, though, just focus on him. Let's just absolutely zero in on him. And if it's not him, hope that Joe Alt falls to us, because he's really the only day one ready left tackle who can start and protect Aaron Rodgers' blind side. I'm not a big believer in any of the other rookies can come in and do that right off the bat. Maybe a few of the right tackles, obviously, but we know that's been set. Some of the safeties out there, before we get over the wide receivers, we got to talk about a few of these guys. There's some big names out there, and maybe I can do this for just a minute. And forgive me if that got too small. But Justin Simmons, Cameron Kroll, these are big names, okay? Those guys are pricey. I doubt we're going to get any of them for a good price or what we're trying to accomplish, but it's nice to think about. You never know where, their market ends up. The safety market is obviously way down, so who knows? Maybe they end up on our side of the fence and they can come in for an interesting price tag. I think it would push Chuck Clark down the list if we did that, but more than likely he is going to be our strong safety while Tony Adams is going to be our free safety. So that kind of leaves Julian Blackmon, who's probably going to get starter money as well, but really Jordan Fuller or even a Micah Hyde, right? You saw what happened with Poyer going down the Dolphins. I'd take Micah Hyde for a year. Would you, as a stopgap third guy? Bring back Ashton Davis and Micah Hyde. Look at that safety room. That would be incredible. And yeah, you could probably, just to throw that in there, you could probably draft a safety to come in and be the third or fourth option, in that fourth, fifth, even sixth round, potentially. You're probably not going to do it in the second or third round. And we know JD doesn't like to burn draft capital on safeties, and he doesn't think of it as a high value position, but we know this defense needs to be elite with those guys coming back in there. All right, I'm going to bring the screen back down here for a little bit. Let's talk about these wide receivers. Again, Curtis Samuel now off the board. He actually got a pretty good deal for what he did up at the Bills, kind of fills Gabe Davis's role. A pretty good contract up there. Tyler Boyd, I have him as my number one, but I flip-flop on this day in and day out. I think he's a very good player. I mean, he's played the past couple of years in the slot, but when he lined up on the outside, I mean, he was a 1,000-yard receiver a couple of years. So he's got durability. He could be wide receiver too. He has the capability of doing that, where Lazard, and let's talk about him for a second, does not. Never could have been. And we've asked him to do way too much, and now potentially shopping him. And, there's a lot of talk about there in the last hour. Hey, are we really shopping him, or did he just come up in trade talks? Is this really happening? I don't really know. Now, do I want him on the team? Actually, I do. Lazard fills a role for me, for all of us, and certainly for Aaron Rodgers. The guy can fly down the field. If Rodgers is the one tossing the football, you've seen it time and again, he can throw that ball up over the 15, 20 yards and get it to Lazard. He's also somewhat of a decent run blocker downfield. Now, again, when he was asked to just be there and be the wide receiver too, not the guy. Should never have been the guy, and we can't ask him to do that again. He fell out of favor with the coaching staff. Not a good thing, certainly. We're paying him way too much money to do what he does, but it is what it is. And now Corey Davis, obviously, is back. He wants to be reinstated. He's 29 years old. He's a real wide receiver too, which is what we're talking about here. We need a wide receiver too. Tyler Boyd somewhat fits that bill. Can fit in the slot where he needs to be. Could also be wide receiver two on the outside. Mike Williams, of course. What's he going to cost, though? Is he more of like the $15 million range? If it's a one-year deal, again, prove that you're healthy, and then we'll talk after that. I'd do it. I think in the $14, $15, $16 million range, I'd give Mike Williams for 1 year for sure. But, and again, going back to Corey Davis, like, we have to now go back to him in free agency and have that conversation to us, because we released him out of his contract today. That'll be interesting. Marquise Brown, he's above Beckham for me. He's above Renfro for me. He's a really interesting name. Again, another guy who could fly. Think back just a couple years ago, right before Murray got hurt. Think of that connection between those two guys. I mean, Marquise Brown was a target monster, up to 30% a game. He was pulling in 8, 10, 12 receptions a game and doing it well and looking good doing it. So plenty of juice left in that guy. Obviously, he's slight of frame. He only fits a certain build, but man, can he fly. And that's what we're talking about here. One thing we've forgotten about, we have to take the top off of defense. That was what was expected when Rodgers was going to be our quarterback. We never saw it. And Wilson never threw the ball downfield. Almost never. We just never get to see it. Now you've got to think about guys who could do that. Lazard is going to fit that role. Marquise Brown can fit that role. Mike Williams can certainly fit that role, especially on contested balls. I would give it to him. Odell Beckham Jr., he's absolutely a second option and a wide receiver too. The problem with him, he's going to want to get paid again, and how he thinks about himself and his negotiating tactics and how long this all takes. I don't see him as a realistic possibility. I doubt that he'd come back in the building. It didn't end well last time we negotiated with him last year, so I don't see it. Hunter Renfro, certainly interesting name, really just fills that need in the slot again, if that's where we're going to go, and you've got him and Xavier Gibson backing that up. Good name. Again, I don't know what you're getting out of him, right? Tyler Boyd, really interesting down year last year. Hunter Renfro, down year last year. But 2 years ago, both of these guys, big numbers. Curtis Samuel, gone. Josh Reynolds, he is, a big-bodied wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. So he doesn't really fit the bill. We need the wide receiver 2 we're talking about. And now, obviously, a lot of the conversation is, are we going to draft that guy at number 10? Yeah, we might very well do that. And finally, KJ Osborne, who nobody's talking about him. So I'm not sure why, but he's a name who we should all be considering. He might still end up a Jet, but again, he'd also fit that kind of third and fourth receiver role. But whatever it is, whoever we take, we cannot, if Lazard remains on the team, however we position this, he can never be more than wide receiver 3 and hopefully wide receiver 4. But yeah, 1 and 2 make a lot of sense on this list. Boyd and Williams. Boyd can do it all. He really can. Go back, watch the tape, look at his past years. He hasn't been in the league 2 or 3 years. He's actually been in the league, I think, 6 or possibly 7 years at this point. He gets it. He gets what it is to be a veteran. He can really do what you need him to do in all the positions across the field. He's a real wide receiver too, but Mike Williams, man, big body. If he's healthy, forget it. You put him across Garrett Wilson, you really got something special with that. And finally, an edge is really a big thing that we cannot overlook as well. We must, at this point, have another edge. You need that third guy in rotation, right? John Franklin Myers is an interesting piece who can line up. We know on the outside and the inside. We know we're getting in Jermaine Johnson. At this point, very exciting stuff. We don't know what we're getting in Will McDonald. You better have somebody out there. Emmanuel Agba, didn't have him on this list until now, but he's definitely an interesting name, right? Spent a lot of time down in Miami. Who knows if he wants to just get paid on a 1-year prove-it deal. If his market doesn't open up and weeks go by, months go by, he gets closer to training camp and he decides, hey, I'm just going to take, a really good chance on a good defense, you might see him. Same thing with Clowney. Clowney's going to wait possibly months. He's been doing this for years at this point before he gets paid again. And if you've got the cap space and just see how this all shakes out, he might be someone to take on. I'd love to have him on there. And same with Kyle Van Noy. He's old now. He's 33 years old, but he had a great year, especially when they pinned his ears back, let him rush the quarterback. I would take him in a heartbeat. Another Baltimore Raven, I know. All right, let's take this out for a minute, and let's just actually talk about what our offense looks like. I pulled this up off ESPN today and just see, what does our depth chart look like right now? Interesting, certainly. Let's call it like it is. Garrett Wilson and Jason Brownlee right there, and Xavier Gibson. Those are realistically our starting options. So we all know we need these wide receivers. Corey Davis is a wide receiver too. We know we need wide receiver too. Something somewhere has to happen. Malik Taylor, who knows if he sticks. Lance McCutcheon, don't know much about him. Irvin Charles and Brownlee, interesting story. Certainly Charles fits that quote-unquote wolf position, playing special teams, especially if we don't bring Hardy back and the money's not right. So whatever it may be, we've got to figure this out, certainly. And I wonder if Nick Bawden sticks this year. It'll be interesting to see when that happens. Also look down at our offensive line. Interesting. Penciled in as a starter right now, according to ESPN, is Austin Deckles with Obina Easy behind him. Vitaly Gurman behind John Simpson. Chris Glazer behind Joe Tippmann. Wes Schweitzer penciled in his right guard for some reason. Elijah Barrett-Tucker all the way in fourth as our fourth stringer for some reason, listed as questionable. So I'm not sure what's going on there. I saw something earlier today, maybe you did too, about Jake Hansen, that he got re-signed as our backup. Would probably be a pretty good backup at guard to bring back. I'm not sure that ever materialized, though. I haven't seen anything else about it or see him on any list. I got to look into it a little bit further. Guys like Xavier Newman, who can play the center position as well. Interestingly enough, the right tackle position seems pretty well in hand at this point, not just with Morgan Moses, but the guys behind him. Carter Warren, who's also able, we got pushed in on his rookie year and had to do a lot. We asked a lot of him, ability to play that left tackle position a little bit. I feel good about him. I feel better about him certainly than Max Mitchell, but I'd still feel okay with Mitchell on there. Another year of strength, another year removed from the blood clots, another year working with maybe a better offensive line coaching staff. You never know what you're going to get from him. I mean, again, he's got a ceiling certainly, but hey, let's just see what it can be. I'm glad that he's still on the team, and neither of those guys really cost anything. But you could see we still got a lot of work to do at wide receiver, a lot of work to do on the tackle positions. And it's just good to kind of see this, and it gives us an idea what we're looking at. How about the defense, right? The defense is obviously the ever-vaunted defense. What sticks out to me here right off the bat is where Kinlaw is penciled in first, right? He's there as a starter, and that's probably right. I mean, more than likely, if you're playing that 4-3, like that's him. That's where he's going to be. You got Franklin Myers out there on the left edge, and you got Jermaine Johnson on the right with Mill McDonald still essentially coming off the bench. He's not ready necessarily to be that starter. You got Quinnen, of course, penciled in there. So, Kinlaw is more than likely going to be on that line. So now you're wondering why we paid the guy $7 million a year. There it is. That's probably what you're looking at. You're probably not going to get anybody else. I think we wanted to have Quentin Jefferson back, but he went elsewhere, and we're still working on getting Solomon Thomas. And Lucky Fotu is definitely more of that second option nose tackle. Interestingly enough, like Kinlaw and Fotu really do not play the same position, but they've kind of got them penciled in together there. Bruce Hector, and the ever revolving door that is Tanzel Smart penciled in fourth there. So interesting. I mean, defensive line, very important. This was kind of like the sneaky position we had to talk about this year that we must address. Yeah, I mean, it's being addressed. So I don't think anybody should be upset that we've addressed these guys and brought in Fotu or Kinlaw or what we're doing, or what the idea is that there's probably going to be some other edge. And one of these other guys is going to get edged out when that is. And obviously, Jamie and Sherwood's kind of somewhat interchangeable when you get Michael Carter on the field and you run that nickel package, right? But Mosley and Williams, like that's it. Mosley got cemented in for another year, possibly two, certainly. And Quincy Williams, we know, got his 3-year deal. I mean, those are our linebackers. And then, of course, we've got to feel great about Gardner, Reed, and Adams. One other name that jumps out on us, because here I am talking about the notion of getting a safety, but here's Jarek Bernard-Converse, who was hurt last year, brought in, as a cornerback, but the idea was transition him to safety. Maybe this is his year. He gets to see that, right? Because you brought in Isaiah Oliver to be that kind of backup cornerback. You got Brandon Eccles, who's still pretty good when he needs to come in and play one of those positions and be a backup. Maybe Jarek Bernard-Converse is really one of those safeties, and we're just needing another guy like an Ashton Davis back on the team, or, maybe a Micah Hyde on a 1-year deal, pretty low deal. So defense to me is still looking great. I still feel very good about this. I mean, a lot of people are concerned that we're taking a step back, especially along the line, losing a Woods or losing Jefferson as we move forward. But no, I think this looks damn good. I mean, the question will be, especially one of those guys, like two of those guys, McDonald and Clemens, really jump out. Like, will Clemens kind of shave the weight back down and play his natural position again, where they've asked him to do too much last year? Is he going to be better on special teams than he was? Can he cut down on some of the bonehead plays he made towards the end of the year? And will McDonald, is this guy coming? Is he going to play 50, 60% of the snaps and absolutely take the quarterback down, 7, 8, 9 times throughout the year? Would love to know. Okay, that's what I've got. If my mouse ever starts working again, let's take a few questions here. Matthias again. So the question is, do you get a wide receiver and free agency in free agency, or do you get the offensive tackling in free agency? I'm not sure you can get both, but leaves you getting the other one in the draft. I like that question, Matthias. Let's talk about that for 1 second. I say that if it's Tyrone Smith, you get the offensive tackle in free agency and you spend the money there. You almost spend all of your money if you have to get him at this point. You need him as that anchor on that line. If not him, if you're going a little bit further down and you're going to take like a Bakhtiari on the 1-year prove-it deal, or somebody else, then, I'd still draft the lineman. I always say this, and I've been talking about this now all week. I would always rather trade down at this point, recoup that second-round pick, get us. Now that you got Morgan Moses, to me, this is a right tackle decision. Joe Alt is the only day one starter you can really possibly rely on to come in. You're probably not going to get him down at 10. I wouldn't want to trade up for him either. Trade back somewhere between 11 to 16, 17, 18. If you have to, take back the second round pick and get somebody else in the right tackle position, you're still going to get a good right tackle, and that's who we need as a depth piece moving forward, because it's been so atrocious for years. And then, get the KJ out of the board if you have to in free agency. To me, it's Tyron Smith, and obviously, if hopefully you can get Tyler Boyd, I don't know how much money we'd have left on that. It's something to think about, but that's pretty much how I'd spend it. Cassandra with a good question. Do we know yet what Jefferson signed for? Yeah, I think Quentin Jefferson with the Browns, we do know. I just don't know exactly what it is. Forgive me. I don't have it in front of me, but it was a decent deal. I think it was more than a 1-year deal. I think he got a multi-year deal, at least a 2-year deal. Sheldon Rankins got an incredible deal for him when he went to Cincinnati. I mean, we didn't come close to paying them that much, nor did the Texans. And then I think he got a 2-year deal for like $26 million. Not quite sure why. But yeah, Jefferson, and I know there was interest in bringing him back, just like there's interest in bringing Solomon Thomas back, but I don't exactly know what we did. Back to Matthias for a second. Yes, trade down, agreed. Let's talk about this for a second. I want to know, if anybody else wants to raise their hand or if anybody's got a question about it, yeah, trading down. This is something you think about what JD talks about. He's always talking about building through the draft. He's done a decent job of doing that. A couple of years notwithstanding, a couple decisions notwithstanding, we know he's a trade monster outside of the draft. He's certainly questionable in free agency over the past couple of years. All of us have agreed on that he's made some decent moves there, but trade down. This is the draft to trade down, especially if you're targeting an offensive tackle. If you're not getting one of those top 3 receivers, you're leaving yourself some big question marks outside of those guys. We're talking obviously about Rome, Marvin Harrison, and Malik Neighbors. If you can't get one of those guys, if they don't fall to you at 10, trade down. And if Joe Alt doesn't fall to you at 10, trade down. You're still going to get a good offensive tackle at that position who's going to be ready to take over next year. You're probably not going to bring Morgan Moses back after this year. You've got to let this guy learn, sit, be competent. We need this idea moving forward. Matthias again. Would you take a QB in a latter round to sit behind Rodgers and Tyrod? Yeah, sure. Why not? Go all the way down to probably the 4th or 5th round and take one. I'm not saying you're burning capital doing that. The only problem with that, look, we're in the league now where you kind of get this third quarterback to sit there. So sure, yes, I would at this point, get somebody else developmental that you feel good about with some good upside and see what you could do. I certainly wouldn't want to burn 1 through 3 in the rounds for the pick. No, I would not do that and try and think about get Penix on the team or anybody else who, somebody else that the guy from Tulane who falls into the 2nd round, whatever it is. That's not going to be our move forward here. You got Tyrod Taylor on a 2-year deal. He's absolutely going to be our backup now for 2 years. You're paying him that kind of money. You're with the expectation, which I love. I'm glad that got cemented. And, of course, we all hope this Rodgers stuff goes away and he's there for at least 2 years. But if you want to try somebody developmental, I don't think, if you're doing that in the 4th or 5th round, you did it in the first time in JD's year with Morgan. That didn't work out. But again, different team, different mentality at that time. Yes, I would take a QB in the later round. It's not a bad idea. But obviously, we've got some other big needs. We're probably going to take yet another interior offensive lineman in one of those rounds, but trade down, get back that second round capital, and get some offensive tackle help in the 1st round. That's going to be our best bet for what we need. Okay, unless there are any other comments or questions, this is going to do it for day 4 of free agency. This is March 14th. I am AM Pfeffer. I'm AM Pfeffer from NYJ Ground Crew. I appreciate you joining me. We're going to do it one more time tomorrow, certainly, same time, 7 o'clock Eastern time. Join me then. Appreciate it. Get those questions and comments ready. Have a good night.